There is no final satisfaction, only an endless pendulum swinging between craving and disillusionment, desire and emptiness. Schopenhauer, with his brutal clarity, exposed the fundamental tragedy of human existence. To desire is to suffer, and to obtain is to be bored. We are creatures of restless longing, forever reaching for something beyond our grasp. The moment we achieve what we sought, the thrill dissipates and a new hunger emerges. Life, then, is nothing more than a cruel alternation between two states, the pain of wanting and the disappointment of having. Schopenhauer saw this as the essence of human existence, an inescapable condition dictated by the very nature of our will. Think about it. What was the last thing you desperately wanted? A job, a relationship, a material possession? The anticipation felt intoxicating, didn't it? The fantasy of possession was more thrilling than the reality itself. But the moment you had it, the emotional high began to fade. The once desired object lost its magic, and soon, a new longing took its place. This is the nature of human desire. We do not want things, we want the wanting itself. Schopenhauer believed that this eternal dissatisfaction is hardwired into us. Our desires are not rational calculations leading to long-term contentment. They are compulsions, endlessly renewed by the force of the will. The will, in Schopenhauer's philosophy, is the blind, irrational force that drives all life. It is the source of our striving, but also of our suffering. We chase fulfillment, but fulfillment never lasts. Buddhism came to a similar conclusion centuries before. The Second Noble Truth states that suffering arises from craving, tanha, the insatiable thirst for things to be different than they are. Yet, unlike Schopenhauer, Buddhism offers an escape. The cessation of craving leads to liberation. But can we, as modern beings shaped by consumption and instant gratification, truly escape this cycle? Dostoevsky, in Notes from Underground, takes this further. He suggests that even if we were given a utopia, a world where all desires were met instantly, we would destroy it ourselves, simply out of the sheer terror of having nothing left to want. We are not just creatures of desire, we are creatures of self-sabotage, addicted to the chase, even when it leads to our own suffering. Thus we are left with an unbearable paradox. If we do not get what we want, we suffer from longing. If we do get it, we suffer from disillusionment. And in that space between one desire and the next, we experience the most terrifying condition of all, boredom. This pendulum swings endlessly, but modern society has found a way to weaponize it. Baudrillard, the philosopher of hyperreality, argued that in a world saturated with images and simulations, our desires are no longer our own. We do not desire things for their real value, but for their symbolic meaning. Brands, experiences, lifestyles, they all function as mirages, illusions that keep us trapped in an endless loop of consumption. So, if Schopenhauer was right, and human life is nothing but a cycle of longing and disappointment, the real question becomes, is there any way to break free? You have it now. The thing you spent weeks, months, maybe even years longing for. And yet, the feeling isn't what you expected. The rush fades, the excitement dulls, and a new craving takes its place. Why does fulfillment always feel like a mirage, something that dissolves the moment we reach it? Schopenhauer explained this through the nature of the will, an endless force of craving that compels us forward but never allows true satisfaction. However, in the modern world, this cycle has become manufactured, monetized, and weaponized. Enter Jean Baudrillard, who saw desire not as a personal experience, but as a construct shaped by the symbols and illusions of society. We don't just want objects, we want what they represent. A luxury car isn't just metal and leather, it's status. A designer bag isn't about functionality, it's about belonging. A vacation to an exotic island isn't just a trip, it's a statement. The market thrives on this illusion, convincing us that happiness is always one purchase away, one promotion away, one perfect relationship away. But once we attain it, we realize it was never about the thing itself. The moment we possess it, the magic disappears, because the true pleasure was never in having, it was in wanting. Baudrillard called this the era of hyperreality, where the symbols of things have become more important than the things themselves. The brands, the curated experiences, the social media personas, they all serve to keep us in a perpetual state of dissatisfaction. The fantasy must always remain stronger than the reality, because if we were ever truly satisfied, the entire system would collapse. Consider the way trends operate. A new smartphone is released, slightly better than the last. The anticipation is carefully cultivated. Leaks, teasers, pre-orders. You finally get it, and for a few weeks, you feel ahead of the curve. But soon, another model is announced, and suddenly, your once desired possession feels outdated. The cycle resets. The same mechanism applies to relationships, careers, even self-improvement. We romanticize the chase, the becoming rather than the being. Falling in love is intoxicating, but maintaining love, that requires effort beyond the initial rush. Landing your dream job feels triumphant, but soon, the routine sets in, and you start eyeing the next promotion. This is the paradox of human longing. The pursuit is pleasurable, but possession is dull. Nietzsche understood this well. He warned against living life as a slave to desires, forever chasing external validation. Instead, he advocated for the Übermensch, the individual who creates meaning internally, rather than seeking it through fleeting external pursuits. But how can we do this when everything around us is designed to keep us longing, scrolling, consuming? If Schopenhauer revealed the tragedy of desire, Baudrillard exposed the artificial nature of modern longing. We do not merely suffer from the cycle of craving and boredom, we are conditioned to remain trapped in it. And the worst part? Even when we realize this, it doesn't set us free. If desire is the fuel that keeps us moving, what happens when reality is no longer enough to satisfy it? Jean Baudrillard had an answer. We enter a world of hyper-reality, where we no longer crave real things, but rather their simulations. We don't just consume objects, we consume the illusion of them. In the past, desire was rooted in tangible needs: food, shelter, survival. But in the modern world, we no longer pursue things for their actual utility. We pursue them for what they represent. A watch doesn't just tell time, it signifies wealth. A vacation isn't just a break, it's a statement of lifestyle. A relationship isn't just companionship, it's a performance curated for validation. We don't want reality, we want the idealized version of it. And once we get it, we realize it was never as perfect as the fantasy. Baudrillard called this phenomenon the simulacrum, a copy without an original, a world where symbols and images replace reality itself. The modern human does not chase love, they chase the image of love, as portrayed in movies and social media. They do not pursue happiness, they pursue the aesthetic of happiness, curated for Instagram. The problem? No simulation can ever live up to the fantasy it creates. And so, we are left perpetually unsatisfied. The thrill of desire only exists in the anticipation, not in the possession. Once obtained, the object loses its magic because the reality can never match the expectation. We fall in love with illusions, not with reality. This is why modern consumption is infinite. The system does not sell us fulfillment, it sells us perpetual dissatisfaction. A new phone, a new car, a new lifestyle, they all function as temporary fixes, keeping us chasing the next illusion. Social media amplifies this further, an endless stream of curated lives, perfectly edited and optimized to provoke envy. And so, we consume not just products, but other people's illusions of happiness, further reinforcing the idea that something is missing in our own lives. Baudrillard warned that hyperreality is not just deception. It becomes more real than reality itself. People no longer desire experiences. They desire the ability to display them. The trip must be photographed. The moment must be shared. Otherwise, it feels incomplete. The self becomes a brand, and every action must be performative. This is why, in an age of abundance, people are more anxious, depressed, and restless than ever, because nothing is ever enough. The dream job becomes a routine. The ideal relationship requires work. The luxury purchase loses its thrill. And in the gap between expectation and reality, existential despair sets in. Schopenhauer saw this as the tragedy of human existence, but Baudrillard understood it as the design of modern society. We are not just trapped in desire, we are trapped in a system that thrives on our dissatisfaction. And the most terrifying question of all, if nothing is ever enough, then what is left? If life is an endless cycle of craving and disappointment, is escape even possible? Or are we condemned to chase illusions, forever unsatisfied? Schopenhauer, Baudrillard, and Nietzsche all approach this question from different angles. One saw life as a trap, another as a simulation, and the last as a challenge to be overcome. But all agreed on one thing. Freedom is not found in possession, but in perception. Schopenhauer, ever the pessimist, believed that breaking free required denying the will. Since desire itself is the root of suffering, the only solution is to renounce it. He admired Buddhist philosophy, which teaches that liberation comes from relinquishing attachment. The irony? This is the opposite of how modern society functions. We are encouraged to want more, to define ourselves through what we consume. The idea of not wanting is radical, almost unthinkable. Baudrillard, on the other hand, saw no true escape. In a world of hyper-reality where illusions are more powerful than truth, even our attempts to rebel are absorbed back into the system. Minimalism becomes a brand. Anti-consumerism becomes a marketing strategy. Even the rejection of status symbols becomes a new kind of status symbol. He suggests that the system has already won because we no longer know what is real and what is constructed. But then comes Nietzsche, who offers a different path, not escape, but transcendence. Instead of rejecting desire, he urges us to redefine it. The Übermensch does not seek meaning through external validation, but creates his own values. Instead of chasing symbols, he finds purpose in the act of creation itself. This means shifting our focus from passively consuming to actively producing. Instead of seeking fulfillment through acquisition, we find it through self-overcoming. Think about the difference between a person who chases love and one who cultivates deep relationships, or someone who buys art versus someone who creates it. The first is passive, always dependent on external sources of validation. The second is active, generating fulfillment from within. This is Nietzsche's solution: to stop searching for meaning in things and start forging it through action. Buddhism offers a similar answer. By becoming aware of our cravings, we gain the power to detach from them, not in the sense of rejecting life, but in the sense of no longer being controlled by illusions. When we recognize that every desire is just a passing state, we can engage with life without being enslaved by it. So, is there a way out? Perhaps the real escape is not from desire, but from the illusion that fulfillment lies in external things. Maybe the answer is not to stop wanting, but to want differently. Because in the end, if we must crave something, let it be something real.